Okay, have you ever stopped to think about how a company that started out selling books online now basically runs the entire internet? Or how a simple e-commerce site can suddenly become a massive bank? Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain and look at the secret playbook these digital giants use to conquer totally new markets. And to do that, our main example is going to be a company you've probably heard of, Mercado Libre, or Mealy for short. For a long, long time, they have been the e-commerce player in Latin America. I mean, they completely mastered the game of selling stuff online in a really complex region. But here's where the story gets really interesting. A huge chunk of Meli's value today isn't just from selling goods, it's from Mercado Pago, their financial tech division. This thing has just exploded, becoming its own financial world way beyond the original website. So the real question is, how on earth did they pull that off? All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at that big question for Meli. Then, we're going to lay out the core strategies in the platform growth playbook. We'll see how Mercado Pago just nailed it, and then we'll contrast that with Amazon's wild leap into cloud computing. After that, we'll get into the why behind these moves, and finally, we'll look at where Meli is placing its next big bet. You know, if you really want to understand these massive companies, you have to get their strategy. And it pretty much all boils down to one huge choice. Do you keep getting better at the thing you're famous for? Or do you go find something completely new to do? Let's unpack that a little. On one hand, you've got what we call exploitation. Now, this is all about perfecting your main business, making your app faster, your shipping more reliable. It's about doing what you do, but just better. Then, on the other hand, you have exploration. And this is the really exciting stuff. This is about heading out into the wilderness to find totally new ways to make money. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. This chart basically maps out that whole world of exploration. And it all comes down to two simple questions. First, on that vertical axis, how much does your new idea overlap with the customers you already have? And second, on the horizontal axis, how new and different is the market you're trying to get into? So this brings us to the first big strategy. It's called platform envelopment. This is what you do when you've got tons of customer overlap, but you're not really entering a crazy new market. You're basically building a new product for the fans you already have. Think about it. Amazon had millions of people buying books, right? So what did they do? They built the Kindle, a device made just for them. It's a super smart, totally logical next move. But then you've got something way more radical. Platform mutation. This is a massive leap of faith. You've got almost zero customer overlap, and they're diving headfirst into a brand new market. And the only way you can do it is by taking some secret weapon you built for yourself internally and turning that into a product for a whole new group of people. Okay, so you've got that framework in your head now. Good. Let's circle back to Mercado Libre. How did they use these ideas to build a fintech giant with Mercado Pago? Well, it wasn't just one big jump. It was actually a really clever, slow migration. So here's the genius part. Mercado Pago didn't launch as a separate company. It actually started as a classic envelopment move. It was just a payment tool they built to make buying and selling on their own site safer and easier for their existing customers. But then, once they got it right, they started pushing it outside the ecosystem, letting other businesses and totally new users sign up. They slowly, carefully slid from envelopment over towards mutation. Brilliant. Now, to really appreciate how smart that slow slide was, it really helps to look at a pure, straight-up mutation. And honestly, there is no better example on the planet than Amazon Web Services, or AWS. And this just lays out the difference perfectly. See, Mercado Pago started with a ton of customer overlap, its own shoppers, and then grew outwards. Amazon with AWS took a completely different road. They had built this unbelievable internal computing power just to run their own giant retail site. Then someone had the bright idea that other companies would pay for access to it, so they launched AWS. Their customers, developers, startups, big businesses, had basically nothing in common with their regular shoppers. It was a direct, massive leap into mutation. So we've seen the what and the how, but we haven't really touched on the why. I mean, why do these companies make these huge, risky bets that could define their future? Well, the motivation behind it all is absolutely key. For Mercado Libre, creating Mercado Pago was, at its heart, a defensive move. In Latin America, digital payments were a mess and a huge pain point for users. By solving that problem themselves, they protected their main business, the marketplace, and made their platform stickier. They were securing the kingdom. Amazon's move with AWS, though, that was pure offense. It was a calculated attack to find a brand new, fast-growing business because their main retail business was starting to mature. It was all about conquering new lands. And this playbook isn't just some case study from business history. It's being used right this second to build the future. So what's coming next for Mercado Libre? Well, the answer might actually be in your fridge. Now, get this. Maluli recently started pushing hard into selling consumer packaged goods, stuff like soap, snacks, sodas, and check it out. An incredible 60% of their existing shoppers have already started buying these things on the platform. That is a huge green light that their envelopment strategy is working right now. So, what's the next play? It's right there in front of them. They can run the exact same script they ran for Mercado Pago. They've already successfully enveloped their customers with packaged goods. The next logical move is to use that foothold to launch into the massive and very difficult market of fresh online groceries. This would bring in new users, get people on the app way more often, and complete that same beautiful migration from envelopment all the way to mutation. Which really just leaves us with one final big thought. We've seen an online store turn into a bank. We've seen a bookseller become the backbone of the cloud. So as every single company out there is now trying to build its own platform, leveraging its own customers and its own internal secret sauce, what's the next crazy mutation that we can't even begin to imagine today?